But that was in the days before orthodontia and high-priced liberal arts colleges like the one I taught at. And so I thought reflected on that, and it seemed to me that Lincoln hated and loathed and despised slavery from early on because he could identify with the slaves. That he himself went out and worked in the hot sun all day, and somebody else derived all the profits. And then unconsciously, Lincoln was identifying himself with the slaves and his father with the slaveholders. Now, but my traditional historian friends, who are all from Missouri, that is, they say, show me, want evidence for this. And I say, well, there's one piece of evidence which I think is suggestive, if not conclusive. Lincoln writes a letter describing his romance with a woman from Kentucky and how it fell apart. And he got engaged to her, and then he got buyer's remorse, or potential buyer's remorse. And he says, there is no form of bondage, real or imaginary, that I have ever been in from which I more longed to escape. So what he's saying in there is, I know what it's like to be in bondage. And I don't think people, when they describe their innermost feelings and use images, choose those images randomly. I think they're quite revealing. And so my friends who are traditional historians say, well, that's interesting evidence, but that's not conclusive enough. And I say, well, all right, if my explanation of why Lincoln hated and loathed and despised slavery from early on isn't sufficiently persuasive to you, what's your explanation? I usually don't have one. Finally, I would like to emphasize another aspect of Lincoln's life in Illinois. In his early political career, from the age of 23 to the age of 40, he tends to be a low-road politician, with the exception of those two slavery issues. A good ridiculer of Democrats and a good humiliator of the opposing party. At the age of 45, from the age of 45 until his death at the age of 56, he is a high-road politician. He doesn't ridicule opponents. He doesn't engage in sarcasm. He doesn't engage in personal attacks. He is a spokesman, a high-minded spokesman for the anti-slavery cause. Between those two periods of the low-road young man and the high-road mature man, there's a 5-year hiatus during which he seems to be doing nothing much at all except practicing law. If you look at his speeches and his writings in that period, from the age of 40 to the age of 45, from 1849 to 1854, it's pretty dull. But I think what happens in those 5 years is Lincoln grows tremendously psychologically, that he overcomes the low-road politician persona, and he develops characteristics which help him become a great president. And it's often said that Lincoln grew dramatically in the White House. That's where he really grew dramatically, was before the White House. All the great qualities you see in Lincoln as president, you see in Lincoln as the man who helped form the Republican Party of Illinois. And two of the great qualities that he manifested as president, you can see in that pre-war period. The first great quality is magnanimity. Lincoln showed incredible, almost superhuman magnanimity in dealing with critics and opponents. There's no better example than the way he chose his Secretary of War, the second Secretary of War, Edwin M. Stanton, who had insulted him and ridiculed him and humiliated him 7 years earlier. Lincoln nonetheless appoints him to his cabinet, and he's a very effective Secretary of War. Then another major quality, and I'll close with this, another major quality is Lincoln's ability to overcome the petty tyranny of the ego. Most people have needy egos. That's particularly true of people in politics and show business. In fact, politics has sometimes been described as show business for ugly people. Let's think about that. In any event, but Lincoln was not tyrannized by his own ego. He refused to take criticism personally. He refused to take disagreement personally. He realized that if the North was to win the war, all factions of the North, all factions of the Republican Party had to be united. And to do that, you couldn't afford to antagonize people. And it's been said that if a man like Abraham Lincoln had been president of the South, and a man like Jefferson Davis had been president of the North, the Confederacy would probably have won. And I think there's a lot of truth in that. Take Jefferson Davis, for example. Jefferson Davis was a classic political, needy ego character. Jefferson Davis took criticism personally, took disagreement personally, and as a result, he quarreled with his vice president. He quarreled with his cabinet. He quarreled with his Congress. He quarreled with newspaper editors. He quarreled with his generals. Lincoln was just the opposite. And I'd like to close with my favorite Lincoln quote. This is from advice that Lincoln gave to a young Union captain who was squabbling with his superior officers. In October of 1863, Lincoln takes time out to give this young man some wise paternal advice. And he starts off by quoting from Hamlet. Lincoln was a great fan of Shakespeare. And he quotes from Polonius' speech to Laertes, the one that contains old chestnuts like, "To thine own self be true, and neither a borrower nor a lender be." So Lincoln tells this young captain that he should avoid this pattern of behavior, of squabbling with his superior officers. He says, "The advice of a father to a son," and then he quotes Polonius, "beware of entrance to a quarrel, but being in, bear it that the opposed may beware of thee." Lincoln says that's good advice, and yet not the best. Quarrel not at all. No man resolved to make the most of himself can spare time for personal contention. Still less can he afford to take all the consequences, including the vitiating of his temper and the loss of self-control. Yield greater things to which you can show no more than an equal claim, and lesser things, though clearly your own. Better to give your path to a dog than be bitten by him in contesting for the right. Even killing the dog would not cure the bite. I thank you for your attention.